Coming up, one SEC coach is pretty impressed with Georgia, and Nick Saban's playing mind games with his team ahead of Ole Miss. We'll talk about it all next here on AT&T SEC Country Live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to AT&T's SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. As we found out yesterday, apparently a pretty big soccer fan, too. We're going to have fun with you over the course of the next 60 minutes as we talk about not soccer, but all the big SEC football games coming up on this weekend. It is a full slate, a lot of storylines that really could impact who makes it to Atlanta in December and which coaches get to come back next September.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is kind of a sneaky big slate. The more I look at this slate for this weekend, the more I kind of love some of these matchups. I think it's going to be fun to kind of dive down into them today.
Yeah, we're looking forward to doing it all with you here today on AT&T's SEC Country Live. Of course, we're brought to you by AT&T, proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. We'll dive into the show the way we do each and every day with our first and 10, the big news around the SEC, including item number 1 on the list. As Georgia gets ready to travel to Knoxville on Saturday to take on Tennessee, I thought the Vols defensive coordinator Bob Shoop had a pretty interesting assessment of Georgia. Now, he's pretty impressed with what he's seen from Georgia offensively, but that's not the only thing that he's impressed with when it comes to the Bulldogs. This is a guy that's coached against Georgia a lot, and he sees something special when he looks at this year's team. Here's how Bob Shoop described it earlier in the week.
You know, obviously I've played against Georgia at a lot of different places. I feel weird, like I've played against them as much as any team that I've ever coached against, at Vanderbilt, at Penn State. Heck, when I was a secondary coach at BC, we played in the Music City Bowl. I think it's the best Georgia team I've seen.
So Bob Shoop, the Tennessee defensive coordinator, guy that, believe it or not, as an assistant coached against Georgia in Mark Richt's first year of 2001, seen him a lot since then, says this is the best Georgia team he's ever seen. That spans a lot of time there. Yeah. You've seen Georgia closely. You played against some Georgia teams and some pretty good ones. Do you think what you've seen from 4 games worth of the 2017 team is better than anything in the last 15, 16, 17 years?
I think it's definitely tough to say. I mean, we're only 4 weeks into the season, but I will say this. I'm going to go along with what he's saying because I think they're playing at a higher level than I might have ever seen them play. Definitely under Mark Richt. And obviously, you're more qualified to answer that. I thought back to 2007, 2008 when I played those guys, when they had guys like Rennie Curran and Muhammad Massaquoi, Dannell Ellerbe, Akeem Dent, all those guys I matched up against, Geno Atkins. I mean, they had a ton of guys that had a ton of talent. And I think that it was maybe one of the most talented teams at Georgia. But right now, the level that they're playing at, for me, for my money, they're playing at a higher level than I've seen them play at in quite some time.
All right, so here's what a couple people are already saying in the comments section. I knew this was coming. It's one of the reasons why I brought this topic up. Brad Klasgen says, how many consecutive years have we been hearing that now about Georgia being better than they've been in a while? David Melton says, it's been 4 games, and he gives the OMG acronym after that. So, you know, with some people like David saying, hey, too soon to judge Georgia. Other people like Brad saying, hey, we've judged Georgia this way a lot of years in the past, and it ends up kind of not working out that way. You know, you almost have to wonder here is this the kind of thing that Georgia fans ought to embrace? Is this the kind of thing that Georgia fans ought to say, you know what, I believe Bob Shoop, and I believe the other media members that say this too? Or do you get the sense that maybe Georgia fans themselves would like to kind of keep this quiet until Georgia proves just a little bit more?
Well, here's the way I've heard from Georgia fans on Twitter, because I have been tweeting a lot about Georgia. I was really impressed with their victory last weekend, and I kind of tweeted that out, and had some back and forth with some people on Twitter, and a lot of the back and forth I got was from Georgia fans that said, you know what, we've seen this before. We've seen them play at a high level through 4 games, and we're not going to get our hopes up just yet. Not until they turn the corner, not until they beat Florida, not until they beat Tennessee. We're not going to crown them yet. And I understand that. I mean, there is a feeling in me, a guy that's, I'm a Cubs fan. I've been around the block as far as teams like that go. You want to see them do it before you start talking about it. I think you do try to enjoy what you're hearing about this team. But I think a lot of people have kind of found the right to be skeptical along the way.
Max McDonald, a Georgia fan, says, I'm used to it at this point. Demetric Evans, maybe a Tennessee fan, not sure, says, we'll see on Saturday how good Georgia is. James Carper reminding, hey, people are talking about Georgia right now, but the Vols have won 2 straight in the series. He gives us a GBO, which stands for Go Big Orange. Brian R. Fink says, when they win the division, please say that. When we beat Bama, then claim it. So maybe saying, hey, until you have some hardware to go by your name, maybe let's not talk about this kind of stuff. And listen, this is not Georgia saying this about themselves. This is Bob Shoop saying what he thinks what he sees when he looks at this Georgia offense ahead of the matchup on Saturday. And to a certain extent, all coaches talk up the opponent they're playing. Bob Shoop's probably doing some of that right here. But it's important to note this is not Georgia or Georgia fans saying, hey, see, look how good we are. This is an opposing coach saying what he's seen from Georgia.
Well, and also, he's not saying that Georgia's the best team in the country. He's not saying that Georgia's going to win a national title. He's saying this is the highest level he's seen Georgia play at. And that's the last 17 years, dating back to 2001. I wasn't around for the 1980 team. Evidently, neither was he. So I think he's just judging it based on what he's seen with his own eyes and what he's seen on film. And the talent level they're playing at with up front in the front seven is as good as I think a lot of people have seen in the last 17 years.
And y'all know that I obviously watch the Georgia program closely because I do Dog Nation daily every day at dognation.com. That's the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. And listen, here's the thing that I will say. And if you're not close to the Georgia program, if you don't watch every single Saturday, you may not be completely aware of this. But Mark Richt, for all the good he did at Georgia, 2 SEC championships, multiple top 10 finishes and seasons, Mark Richt had a very good career at Georgia. But through going into his third season, at our second season on the field at UGA, third recruiting cycle, what Kirby Smart's already proven is he's a better recruiter than Mark Richt is. So he's building a roster that's deeper and more rich with talent than anything that Richt ever had. Now, is it that way in 2017, the way it will be in 2018? Probably not yet. But already the 2017 team, it's tougher to get on the bus, the 70-man travel roster. It's getting much harder to do that at Georgia than it used to because of the fact that Kirby's just a better recruiter than Richt was.
Yeah, and obviously it's still early in his tenure. I mean, Mark Richt, like you said, did a lot of good things there. So I don't know if I'm ready to crown the guy as, a better recruiter than Mark Richt. Mark Richt did it over a long period of time. We've seen Kirby do it in a short burst to begin his stint there. I think you have to carry that consistently throughout. But what I will say is they look like a team that's hungry. I mean, under Mark Richt, from the teams that I saw, and I played them up close 2007, 2008, and I went to the game, against Bama in 2012. I've seen these teams up close. To me, it's almost like they expect to win more than they did under Mark Richt. And it's like, hey, we're not just going to, it's not just going to suffice for us to go out and get a 17 or 14-point victory when we're able to win. Or, the way they slammed Mississippi State into the ground last weekend, I thought was very impressive and very indicative of the direction they were headed in.
All right, can we do my favorite topic on today's show?
Item
number 2. This is such a juicy topic. And look, here's the setup for it. It's item number 2 on our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10. So Ole Miss, Alabama on Saturday. And listen, you know that Ole Miss, given what happened last week against Vanderbilt, you know that Matt Luke, the interim head coach, said none of y'all say anything. None of y'all give any bulletin board material whatsoever to Alabama. Let's have no knuckleheads sounding off and spouting off, and let's try to sneak up on Alabama if we can here, because obviously the Ole Miss team that'll play this Saturday nowhere near as good as the one that beat Alabama in consecutive years in 2014 and 2015. Apparently, Nick Saban is still trying to find some extra motivation for his team. Listen to the message that I believe that Saban tried to send to his team through the media on Wednesday. This is perfect Saban, this is perfect gamesmanship, and this is, I believe, setting up the perfect mindset for Alabama on Saturday. Really funny stuff. Watch this from Nick Saban here.
This is really an important game. Obviously, this is a team that 2 out of the last 3 times we played has gotten the best of us. I think the ultimate disrespect sometimes is when somebody quietly thinks, they got your number, and our players need to understand that.
So here's what Saban says there. You haven't said anything, nobody's talking trash, but I think I know what you're thinking, and I think that you're guilty of the ultimate disrespect. If I was Matt Luke, I'd pull Saban close on Saturday and say, why'd you do that to my team? Can we not play this thing straight up on the level? You're going to go tell your players that we're guilty of the ultimate disrespect? We're just trying to get out of this game alive. Beautiful ploy by Saban. I got to give him credit for that, but come on, if you're Ole Miss, you're like, is this really what we're going to have happen to us here?
Well, I love it. I love it coming from Nick Saban. I think he pulls from all aspects of this game to try to motivate his players. We've seen it time and time again that this is what Nick Saban's going to do. And I've teeter-tottered on whether or not this is respect or disrespect. I think that Ole Miss definitely has a lot of players' attention in that locker room. And I think a lot of the players that are still around from those games a couple of years ago do maybe feel that way. Maybe we do have their number. The only thing that's gone really is Hugh Freeze and Chad Kelly. I mean, they still have a serviceable quarterback and a lot of talent on the roster. So I think you're going to obviously ask the questions with Hugh Freeze gone. I'm one of those guys that I would rather be disrespected by my opponent than respected by my opponent. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'd rather be trash talk than be like, you know what? You're really close to being good. I feel like you're really close to getting over the hump. Just need like one more play. I would rather be disrespected. Like, talk down to me before you respect me.
I get what you're saying, but the whole idea of, hey, I don't want somebody just sort of patting me on the head, giving me these sort of backhanded compliments. But in the case of Ole Miss, I believe that Ole Miss is scared of Alabama. And I believe that a lot of teams are kind of lining up to play Alabama right now are scared. You say, not that much has changed for Ole Miss. The truth is, There is no Laramie Tunsil anymore. There is no, Kim Deitch anymore. Some of the big names that made it possible for Alabama to be played close by Ole Miss, those guys are gone. This Ole Miss team that'll play Alabama on Saturday is a shell, I believe, of what it was in 2014 and 2015. And if you're Matt Luke, you're just trying to get a job after this one's over. This season's over for Ole Miss. And you got Alabama and Nick Saban accusing you of the ultimate disrespect here. I don't fault Saban for doing it. As we said on one of our shows earlier this week, if you're Alabama, your biggest rival right now is boredom. Your biggest enemy is complacency, given the fact that you've won 3 consecutive SEC championships. You've got to find a way to make each game interesting and each game its own challenge. And Saban, I think, pretty creatively does that here by saying, listen, they think they've got our number privately. That's the ultimate disrespect. I don't fault him for doing that. But in this case, I don't believe Ole Miss goes into this game thinking that's true. But by Saban saying that, he increases the likelihood that Ole Miss is going to limp out of this football stadium on Saturday.
No, I disagree with you, because to me, I've been in one of these locker rooms, and I've been on bad football teams at Alabama. We stunk a couple of years that I was there, and that's just the bottom line. I mean, 2006 and 2007, we weren't very good. Never did I go into a football game scared, though. I mean, we definitely were outmatched against opponents, and probably shouldn't have been on the same field with some of the people we played. But I think they have to have that mentality in the locker room. If you are Matt Luke and you're over there in the Ole Miss locker room, you're not saying it out loud. You're not saying, hey, we beat them 2 out of the last 3. But I guarantee you that he's in there talking to those players going, you guys know how to beat this team. You know how to beat them. We've seen it before. We've lined up in our Ole Miss uniforms the last couple of years before last year. And not only that, but last year wasn't exactly a blowout. I think it was 48-43 Alabama in Ole Miss. So, at one point, Ole Miss was up 24-3 there in the first half. So he's telling these players, hey, you know how to go beat this team. This is not like, hey, we're going to have to limp off the field. You guys have been in slugfest the last few years, and you have won 2 out of 3, so we know how to do this.
So you think there's a chance that privately Saban is right, that privately Ole Miss thinks, hey, we've got a recipe for Alabama. We know the blueprint here. You think there are people in that Ole Miss locker room that think that?
I don't think that Matt Luke thinks that, but I think that's the message he's giving his players. Because why not? Why wouldn't you? Why would you say, you know what, we're going to respect this team, and I'm not sure we can win, but you know what, we're going to give it our best shot. I think he's going in there delivering that message, saying, you know what, you guys have not been blown off the field. I know it looks like a mismatch on paper, and Alabama's a 28.5-point favorite, but at no point have you been in a mismatch the last few years with this team.
So here's my final point on this. You made a reference to your playing career a moment ago. I think that your playing career does not set you up for what it's like playing Alabama right now. And I do think that Ole Miss is scared of this game against Alabama because they saw what happened last week to a Vanderbilt. And frankly, I'm not sure that Ole Miss is better than Vanderbilt. I think there's a chance they're not. But for me, it's more than that. Vanderbilt didn't just lose, they got embarrassed. They've been roasted on social media all week since then because of the trash talk by the Vandy defensive lineman going into the week, and just the way that Vanderbilt got blown off the ball so much during the game. Nobody wants to be embarrassed. Nobody wants to be sort of publicly humiliated the way that social media can do that to you. I think that teams that play Alabama right now have at least in the back of their mind of a lot of teams that have been in this spot before have been humiliated on social media after the fact. I think Ole Miss has got to be at least thinking about that a little bit.
Well, see, and I take it back to my playing career because I've been in a lot of those situations, like you said, and maybe that does kind of temper the way I feel about going in and playing Alabama right now. But also, I know the way these playing careers have played out at Ole Miss for these players. I mean, like I said, lost by 5 points a year ago and won the 2 years before that. So at no point have these guys been scared to play Alabama or felt like they didn't belong on the same field. I think that mentality starts to show up again this weekend. I think they have a puncher's chance. I still have Alabama winning the game, but I think Ole Miss is going to make a little bit of noise.
Cody Duncan says an SEC team is not scared of another team. That's not how it works. The fact of the matter is, Ole Miss used to be a full-fledged SEC team. Right now, the team that's going to play Alabama on Saturday is really, I believe, a shell of its former self. They've lost recruits. They don't have a cutting-edge head coach the way they once did. This is not the same Ole Miss team that was beating people in the SEC, including Alabama, just a couple of years ago.
Sherman Towns calling for the upset. Ole Miss 24, Bama 21. I'm telling you, and Cliff Nelson said something else about it too. Shea Patterson's the kind of quarterback that can give Alabama fits. They don't have the pass rushers they used to, so I do think that Shea Patterson, in a lot of these instances, is going to be allowed to run around in the backfield a little bit. I think the defensive line from Alabama has to do a good job of pressing back that pocket and not allowing him to escape and make plays with his legs.
I do like Shea Patterson. I don't mind anybody saying he could have a big individual day. I just don't think it's enough for Ole Miss to keep it close. Now, it's a big number here. We'll do this more with our MyBookie Best Bet segment coming up in a moment. But it's a big number there. So I won't get involved with the point spread so much. But in terms of being a close game in the fourth quarter, I don't see that from Alabama Ole Miss.
Well, listen, we've mentioned Shea Patterson. I don't know if he's a poor man's Chad Kelly, or he's better than Chad Kelly, but what I do know is Chad Kelly had 420 yards against this defense last year and did a lot of the same things that Deshaun Watson ended up doing at the end of the year for Clemson. So I'm not ready to roll Ole Miss completely out of just making this a close game.
Item number 4 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So Jim McElwain on Wednesday was asked once again about the 9 suspended players, all of which facing felony charges, and at least in some cases, felony charges kind of piling up on some of these guys. And McElwain kind of pushed back on the question because the fact that the facts, as far as he's seeing them, haven't really changed a whole lot here. Here is what McElwain said in response to more questions about guys that haven't practiced all season long up to this point. Could they even play in a game now in the 2017 season? Here was McElwain's response to that.
Yeah, I think everybody's different. I don't have a crystal ball. And at this point, there's really no reason to even look there and tell if that may happen or not. Right? We'll know after the time when it gets decided at the legal piece, and then obviously at the school piece.
In the entire time we've been doing this show, I have never done that before. I have never done that. Some of you in the comment section caught it. Daniel Robbins did. I completely skipped over a topic here on AT&T SEC Country Live. Here's what we'll do. We'll go back and do that one again in a moment. Since we're on Jim McElwain, let's finish this topic. And Tennessee fans, I'll talk about you and your school here in just a moment. I apologize for that. Literally, that's the first time I've ever done that before.
I think it is. Yeah, I think we've been doing this 6 months now.
Now, I'm capable of making a lot of mistakes, but that's a mistake that's thus far I've avoided. But when you look down at your notes, it's probably a little easier to do than maybe we give it credit for.
Yeah, listen, it's something that doesn't happen much, but let's not jinx it. It'll come back around next week.
That's exactly right. So we'll talk some Tennessee here in a moment. Let me finish this Florida conversation since I started it, though. I think this is interesting because, for me, I'm talking about the absence of these Florida players in a very different way than I thought that I probably would.
Yeah.
I thought 9 guys missing from the Michigan game. I thought it cost Florida in a big way. And I thought that Florida's offense might not be able to weather the storm of being without Antonio Callaway, being without Jordan Scarlett. And if you told me then that these guys may never play in a Florida game ever again, or certainly not play in the 2017 season, I would have thought that Florida's season was done. The truth is, though, I think that Florida's actually done a pretty good job of weathering the storm of these guys being absent. And all of a sudden, now listen, I don't want to sort of overlook 9 guys missing from a roster. That's almost like an NCAA suspension, almost like an NCAA, kind of harsh penalty to
sanctions,
be sanctions to be without that kind of scholarship load. But Florida, for the most part, has kind of weathered that storm. Do you think, based on what you just heard McElwain say there, they've moved on from these players?
Well, I think if they haven't, they probably should. And I think the conversation to me about all these suspended players, and especially about Jordan Scarlett and Antonio Callaway, it starts and stops with Kadarius Toney and Malik Davis. I think they've found guys that they feel like can take up some of that load. Now, is Kadarius Toney what Antonio Callaway was? Not yet. Is Malik Davis what Jordan Scarlett is? We don't really know. But I think they have found people that are serviceable in a lot of those roles that you thought that Jordan Scarlett, when you looked at them getting suspended, you weren't sure what you were going to get after those guys left. And I feel like they've done a very good job. Not that Florida's offense has blown you away, but just finding playmakers on the offensive side of the ball, Tyree Cleveland, Powell, they've found some depth, obviously, at the wide receiver position and in the backfield. And I feel like the way they've done that has kind of made you not forget about those guys, but it allows this team to kind of move on and move in the right direction.
John Rosado says the players won't play this year. The juniors should be gone. The freshmen should redshirt and be back next year. I tell you, though, any kind of felony charge from anybody, though, I don't know that you can come back and play at Florida because of that. Isom Stewart seems to kind of agree. He says they shouldn't play. And I think a lot of Florida fans are expressing that. It's almost like if you remember the old 80s basketball movie Hoosiers, when the coach says, "My team's on the field," you get the impression after watching Florida win at the buzzer against Tennessee, win late against Kentucky. Florida fans have kind of sort of resolved themselves to cheering for the team they have. My team's on the field. And I think Florida fans have taken on the mindset that Jim McElwain just took in the video that you heard, where these guys for right now are sort of out of sight, out of mind, and it's almost like we need some evidence. I'm speaking from the perspective of Florida here. It's almost like we need some evidence as to why they should be on the field again, as opposed to the evidence that sort of prohibits them from ever playing again.
Yeah, and let me give you an insight just from the way I see it with my own eyes, because I've been in these situations where you win some of these late games and some of these crazy opportunities. You have guys that are, acquaintances on your team. There's 120 guys on a football team. You don't know everybody. You kind of blend in with people. You get to know people over time. You pass them in the halls. You sit around in the locker room. You can chat with them. When you win a game like they won against Tennessee, you are up in everybody's face. It don't matter who your teammate is. It doesn't matter who that guy is. All of a sudden, you've become closer with that guy
that's
because
a really
you've
good
won
point
in a situation like that. And I think this locker room for the Florida Gators really has come closer together over the last couple of weeks. obviously you're gonna be hurting for the talent. When you take away that many scholarships, there's going to be a lack of depth and some issues that stem up from it. But I think the locker room as a whole and the players that have been around this program feel a lot better with the people they have in place and feel like they can count on the guys that have been making plays.
Jeff Hefner, I think, kind of agrees with you. He says, kick them out of UF. Whether we win or lose, McElwain is cleaned up. And I think what Jeff is kind of talking about there, to go along with what you were saying, is there is a such thing as sort of addition by subtraction sometime. And I would have not known for Florida that subtracting these guys would have made things better. And I don't want to sort of draw a line to say, and that's why Florida's won the last 2 weeks. Because the truth is that may not necessarily be the case. But I do think that exists in sports sometimes, where the locker room is happier when you've got every guy sort of rowing in the same direction.
Yeah, and I think we touched on that a couple of weeks ago when this all came down was, how many times are you going to give Antonio Callaway a pass? How many times is he going to get in trouble? Not just from Jim McElwain, but from the guys in the locker room. I think Greg McElroy touched on it, and we touched on this show what Greg said, where you have to have that leadership step up and hold these players accountable and say, you know, how many passes are you going to get? How many times are you going to be in trouble with the law or arrested or interrogated over some of the issues you've had before we start to move on as a team? I think that process has started. I'm not saying Antonio Callaway's played his last game as a Gator, but I think this team and the leadership really have started to move on from some of these guys and understand that we're going to have to go to battle with what we have. And those guys may come back and they may not. Let's go ahead and get better with the people we can count on.
All right, if you're looking at the screen, you see the Texas A&M topic. We'll get to another cool alternate uniform here in a moment. Let me go back before that, though, and remind you, that's Mike Johnson. My name is Brandon Adams. It's AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. And let's back up here and go back to topic number 3, a topic that I just completely glossed over a minute ago, which I did not mean to do. But if you're a Tennessee fan, I think you'll probably find this to be pretty interesting, that former Vols quarterback Peyton Manning goes on the sports radio station, 104.5 The Zone there in Nashville, and he talks about why he's not running for Senate. But then at the end of the interview, he gets into Butch Jones, and he's asked, what do you think of Butch Jones? What do you think of the current state of Tennessee? And the biggest name Vol of them all gives a pretty full-throated defense of Tennessee coach Butch Jones. Here's what Peyton had to say.
Hey, I'm all in. I am all in, and I'm behind Butch Jones. I saw him last Friday. I was in Knoxville for a fundraiser for the university, and look, he was as disappointed as anybody about losing to Florida down there in that heartbreaking fashion. So I'm right there. Obviously, I know it can be frustrating at times for fans that want to win every game, and believe me, I do as well. And I can promise you, nobody cares more about University of Tennessee football than Butch Jones. I mean, he literally eats, sleeps, and breathes it, and I love that passion.
By the way, Cliff Nelson in our comment section referencing me jumping around topics says 1, 2, 4, 3. Isn't that how they count in Florida and Alabama? Yeah, Cliff, maybe it might be, but we thought what Manning had to say there was worth kind of going back and hearing what Manning had to say. And listen, I'm not surprised that Peyton Manning defends Butch Jones. I really wouldn't expect anything else. Manning is sort of an establishment guy, right? I mean, that's a word that gets thrown around in political circles a lot right now, an establishment guy. Manning is definitely pro-establishment here, but I don't know, because he is establishment and because he's kind of the man, so to speak, I don't know that Tennessee fans are like giving Butch Jones another chance just because Peyton Manning said they should. I don't know that that message works with the people that it's intended to be heard by.
No, I don't think it works at all. And I think this is why a lot of people love Peyton Manning. I think this is also a lot of people why a lot of people are still going to continue to question Butch Jones, even though Peyton Manning has said this, is because Peyton Manning's comments, and Tennessee fans have grown to know this over the years, they're about as measured as any comment you're going to get out of anybody. Any kind of public figure, Peyton Manning knows the message he wants to take into these interviews. He's almost never caught off guard, and even when he is, he gives very calculated, measured responses to what he wants to say and delivers the same message. So I'm not shocked either. I'm not shocked by what he said by Butch Jones. I would expect him to back up Butch Jones. I think he counts Butch Jones as a friend, which makes it a lot tougher to call for a guy's job, even though you're involved with that program. I think he's a little bit too close to the scenario and sees kind of the small improvements that Tennessee's made. But I don't know if Peyton Manning has really collected all the evidence that really does knock Butch Jones.
So you and I are on kind of the same wavelength when it comes to this a little bit, that he is calculated, he thinks about what he says before he says, and the fact that he even grants the interview here the week before a big game against Georgia. He knows the question that he's going to be asked. So therefore, do you think it's a possibility that someone at Tennessee said, hey, Peyton, how about you make yourself available for an interview, and how about you say something nice about Butch Jones? He could really use that right about now. Do you think there's a chance that that this calculated message, if that's indeed what it is not one that Peyton Manning decided to deliver, but that Peyton Manning was asked to deliver.
Well, I don't know that it exactly played out like that, but you know, I think we've talked about before the show that he's going to be like an honorary captain this week. He's going to be doing something before the game. So I think that in itself is another way, like we said yesterday, the gimmicks to kind of take your mind off what's going on with Butch Jones. I think Peyton Manning just adds to it. And maybe they're like, hey, you know what? You're going to do this before the game. Let's bring you in and have you on this radio interview to kind of talk about it and set you up. I do think it's a ploy. I don't think it's a direct ploy, but I do think it's a little bit of a ploy by the Tennessee Athletic Department to kind of take a little bit of that spotlight and skim a little bit of that negative news.
Daniel Robbins in the comment section says, once Tennessee gets over the injuries, watch out. And so, listen, this is one of those things where, like, I want to be respectful to the Tennessee fans' opinion who think that their sort of downturn this season and last was all devoted to injuries. I want to give them a chance to make their case for that. I will admit, though, that's not exactly the way that I see it. I see Tennessee very similar last year to, we talked about Ole Miss a couple of minutes ago from 2014 and 2015. Teams that, when they were fully healthy, their starters could compete with anybody. Ole Miss could beat Alabama. And if Tennessee had all its starters healthy, it could probably give Alabama a run for its money last year and maybe this year too. But the problem you see at Tennessee is, and yes, Butch Jones has brought big numbers of recruits in the program, but he hasn't brought in the kind of elite talent that if a star player gets hurt, you've got a guy that steps in behind him who can be just as good. This roster's just too thin for that to create that kind of depth.
I do think it's interesting, too, because you saw what I was doing on my computer before we went on air. I was on Twitter, and I always try to kind of get the feel of the fans on some of these topics, especially when we're going to talk about firing a guy or firing a head coach. Somebody as polarizing as Butch Jones. You go on Twitter and you look at stuff from Butch Jones, and what popped up? It was the same storylines, but 2016, 2015, 2014, and it just seems like we've been playing this on repeat for the last few years. It was last year it was the injuries, or last year the ball was bouncing the wrong way or bouncing the right way. People that want to defend Butch Jones see the things they want to, and people that want to knock him see it a different way. And I think it just polarizes a lot of the Tennessee fan base to the point where I don't know what to think of this guy. I don't know what the pulse of the Tennessee fan base is. All I know is the numbers that popped up are this: 33-22 at Tennessee, 14-19 in the SEC, 0-11 against AP top 10 teams, and 6-16 versus top 25. That's what I know about Butch Jones' tenure.
Let me squeeze in a quick comment here. Jeff Hefner says, Manning's always been classy and politically correct. He wants Butch's desk, LOL. I don't think Peyton Manning wants any part of being, I don't think he wants to be Tennessee senator. I don't think he wants to be Tennessee coach. This guy's made hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
I think he just wants to do TV commercials and hang out with his family. Being a coach in the SEC is a hard job. You got to really, really want it. It can't be like your third career. I mean, it can't be the thing that you do just because you don't have anything else to do. His heart wouldn't be fully. I don't think Tennessee wants. I don't think Peyton Manning wants to be Tennessee coach.
It doesn't work like that. I mean, I've had opportunities to kind of look at going into coaching and things like that when I was done playing football. There's a reason that I'm sitting next to Brandon Adams right now on the show, because I didn't want any part of that. I want to be able to spend time with my family. That's what Peyton Manning wants to do. He wants to sit back, you know, drink a Bud Light, have some Papa John's, and just kind of enjoy his life in retirement.
Is the reason why you're sitting next to me because I'm so handsome and debonair?
That could be it. I don't know.
All right, that's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Now, let's try to get the show back on track in order, the way that we planned to do it at the beginning of the day. Let's jump back to item number 5 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And listen, alternate uniforms, for whatever reason, kind of pop up as a topic on this show from time to time. We talked about them a good bit yesterday, and now we get some remnants of this coming from the Texas A&M program as well. Except we're not entirely clear of what's going on here. Let me show you this first. Here's a picture of a helmet that the Texas A&M equipment staff released on Twitter. I don't know if you can tell, the Texas A&M logo there, that's not white, that's a shiny chrome. So the helmet that Kentucky wore last week, the shiny silver chrome, that's what the letters in the Texas A&M helmet are right there. You also have a little bit of a sheen on the regular maroon helmet there also. So that's the Texas A&M helmet. The fact is, we don't know when they're going to wear those. Is that this Saturday against South Carolina? Is it a few weeks against Mississippi State? That is a game in which the Aggies are wearing an alternate uniform. We know that because Adidas recently released this video. We'll show you a taste of the A&M alternate uniforms here. So this is the A&M alternate uniform. Now, from this video, you can't really tell if those are the chrome helmets or not. At least I can't tell because the thing, moves around so much. But nonetheless, do you think the chrome logo on the side of the maroon burgundy helmet for Texas A&M, is that a good look? And should they wear those against South Carolina?
I know you'd enjoy the chrome. I know we heard that about Kentucky last week. And Is this the same jersey that we saw from Snoop Dogg before the season started, where he was holding
that?
that up?
Yeah, I remember
can't
that.
remember. I was trying to remember watching that video. Is this the same one that Snoop Dogg was like, man, yeah, these are fly uniforms or whatever? But
did I say it was fly?
I'm talking about Snoop Dogg. I'm talking about Snoop Dogg. Yeah, listen. It is what it is at this point. I mean, I don't know how to go in any other direction with this. I don't know if this hypes up your team or if it hypes up your fan base. If it does, I'm all about it. I think the helmet's a good-looking helmet. But I think that at some point we're going to waste this on a team that probably isn't deserving of it. I do love the purple from LSU. I love what Kentucky did with the chrome helmets, but I just feel like, man,
I think the LSU purple is just a good-looking uniform.
I just these alternate uniforms. I feel like this is so pushed by some of these major brands right now. Maybe Adidas is looking for some kind of positive publicity. It just feels like these are so forced, and week after week we talk about these alternate uniforms. Let's go out and win the game. That's what these games are all about. Let's let Texas A&M for once this year go out and deal with business against South Carolina.
Here's the only point I'll say in disagreement with you, because for the most part I actually agree with almost everything you say there. I think a lot of this stuff kind of feels like gimmicks. In the case of Texas A&M, though, they are in such a crowded marketplace in Texas where every one of those schools is sort of fighting for its own brand of attention. You know, Baylor builds a new stadium. Texas got a new coach. On and on you could go in terms of what Texas programs do to try to generate attention with the recruits. You know, I do think, Kevin Sumlin used to talk about a swag copter that he'd fly around on and go out and visit recruits. I do think there's a certain element of swag that's necessary if you want to get recruits' attention in a big state like Texas. So from that standpoint, I do think A&M's got a little more of an obligation to try to, rattle some pots and pans and make some noise more so than the typical team does, because they sort of need more attention than the typical team does. The other SEC schools, for the most part, own their state. A&M is in a state that's very tough to own.
Right. I agree with you too, and they are more of like a buttoned-up kind of military style program. They all have the military uniforms on. They do the midnight yell. So I guess it is cool looking from that direction, saying, you know what, this is an opportunity for these students, these fans to kind of loosen things up on Saturday. But you're right. They're in a market right now where it's tough to compete with the Texas Longhorns. I know that A&M, that's one of the biggest reasons they moved to the SEC. I just want to see it play out on the field. I really do. I don't know if they're going to use these this weekend. Alabama goes to town next weekend. Maybe that's when they're going to pull them out. But I want to see, when we do pull out the gimmicky uniforms, I want to see some victories come from it, and I want to see a different atmosphere in some of these stadiums.
All right, that's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. We'll get back to our AT&T SEC Country Life First and 10 in just a moment. What do you say, though, we take a look at the games this weekend from a gambling perspective? Let's see if we can figure out who's got the edge from a point spread standpoint as we do our MyBookie Best Bets. Kind of a busy slate here in the SEC on Saturday. So I'm going to kind of rattle through these, and I'm going to ask you a simple question. You give me the answer. Florida, Vanderbilt, Gators a big favorite. Gators easy win or closer than the experts think?
Closer than the experts think. For me, Vanderbilt just plays that style that can keep this game really tight.
Yeah, I think Vanderbilt bounces back from the Alabama game last Saturday. I could see them getting underneath that 10-point number. Arkansas, New Mexico State. First of all, how are the Hogs only a 17-point favorite over the Aggies of New Mexico State? Can Arkansas cover that number?
I heard them talking earlier. New Mexico State has covered 4 weeks in a row, the first 4 weeks of the season. But I think Arkansas kind of hit a little bit of an offensive stride last week. I think they had the athletes to be able to pull away in this one.
I wouldn't trust Arkansas to cover against anyone right
I won't be putting any money on it. That's just speaking at you right now.
I think Georgia wins against Tennessee, but I'd be tempted to take Tennessee plus 7.5.
I would be tempted. I'm still going to take Georgia. I think they win by 2 touchdowns next.
Kentucky probably bounces back against Eastern Michigan. I'm assuming Eastern Michigan's not very good.
Yeah, who knows in that one. That's another one of those games like UMass and Tennessee or Louisiana Tech in South Carolina.
I think Auburn is good. I think that 9 points is a lot. I'd be tempted to go Mississippi State plus 9.
If this was at Mississippi State, I'd be with you. But I think the fact that this is a home game for Auburn, I think their fans are ready to get them back home and play a meaningful game. I think Auburn runs away with it.
I think LSU's a bit of a mess right now. 21 points is a lot. They may cover it just because Ed Orgeron wants to flex his muscles a little bit, but that's a program I don't really trust against really anyone right now.
I'm with you, though, on the Ed Orgeron thing. I think it's time for them to kind of stamp their foot down, understand what their game plan is going to be moving into conference play next weekend. So I think he does everything he can to win this one going away.
I think there's a chance the wrong team is favored of South Carolina and Texas A&M. I think Gamecocks win that game outright.
I want to be with you on that train, but Texas A&M at home, I think they've found a little bit of a footing on offense. And South Carolina still has a lot of questions without Deebo Samuel. So I kind of like Texas A&M in that.
I think Alabama's an easy winner against Ole Miss, but I'm not laying 28 points in an SEC game.
I'm not laying 28 points either. We mentioned a 5-point win last year. They won the 2 years before that. I'm not ready to say that Bama's 28 points better than Ole Miss yet.
All right, that's our MyBookie Best Bet segment. It's brought to you by our friends at MyBookie. Listen, one of the reasons why you want to think about joining MyBookie is because a lot of these online sites, when you win, you don't really get that fast payout. You don't get your money. But MyBookie, that's what they're known for, the fast, no-hassle payout when you do win. But right now, MyBookie's got an even better deal for you than that. When you sign up right now, your first deposit could be matched up to 100%. All you got to do is go to mybookie.ag. Make sure you use the promo code SECLive. That's the promo code SECLive at mybookie.ag. You could get your first deposit matched up to 100%. You play, you win, you get paid. It's that simple. mybookie.ag. Use the promo code SECLive. All right, let's dive back into our AT&T SEC Country Live 1st and 10 list here with item number 6 on the list. And you know, we started our show today by hearing Tennessee defensive coordinator Bob Shoop giving a compliment to the Georgia offense. How about a return favor here from Georgia head coach Kirby Smart to the running back he's going to face on Saturday, John Kelly. Now, what Kirby says about Kelly is such effusive praise, it kind of gets me wondering where Kelly must rank among SEC running backs. Listen to how much Kirby Smart apparently likes the Tennessee running back, John Kelly.
One of the best backs I've seen, really, in a long time. That's what I think about him. He runs through arm tackles. He's extremely physical. He's violent in his blow delivery. I mean, this guy's stiff arms. He's hit people all over the place. The guy has incredible leg drive. I mean, I thought that last year about the guy. This year, he's just like Alvin and Hurd all together in one. I mean, the guy runs hard, and he doesn't seem to get tired. The more carries he gets, the more physical he runs. You know, some of those runs he had at the end of the game against Florida were really impressive, and I got a lot of respect for him as a competitor.
So listen, I have thought of John Kelly as a good running back in a league that's full of good running backs, but when Kirby Smart says that, it gets me wondering, well, is John Kelly perhaps the SEC's best running back? He's certainly shouldering more of an individual load right now than almost any other running back is for his particular SEC team. And maybe Tennessee beats Florida because he's so good, had the Vols given him the ball near the goal line there. Is John Kelly the best running back in the SEC?
I'm not ready to say that. I think he's very good. I think he's talented in so many ways. I think he has that rare combination of ability to have that breakaway speed and also run through some of those arm tackles like Kirby Smart was just talking about. But you're right. There's a different dynamic right now at Tennessee than there almost is at any other program. When you look at what's going on at Texas A&M, they have a two-headed attack. When you look at Auburn, two-headed attack. Stable at Georgia, at Alabama, at Florida right now. Even LSU has been forced with Darius Geis kind of nicked up the last couple of weeks to put in Darrell Williams and some of their other backs in the backfield. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt on a lot of these situations because he is carrying the crown right now for Tennessee. It doesn't feel like anybody else is in the backfield. He's already got 450 yards, 6 touchdowns on 81 carries. So I think it's as much of a lock as I can think of in the SEC right now that he covers 1,000 yards by the end of the year.
Look at that. If you're watching on Facebook Live, of course you probably are, but look at that string of frowning face emojis just coming off the screen. I mean, they're just like streaming across. People are like angry that that would even be suggested about John Kelly. But, you know, in the comment section, James Crump says through 4 games, he has been the SEC's best running back. So even if some fans don't want to agree with that, or maybe you think your guy on your team has been better, I mean, there is at least, you know, some evidence to suggest that. James Crump brings up in the comment section.
Yeah, my question to anybody that disagrees with that, because I do disagree with that. I'm not sure he's the best back right now, but who are we crowning as the best back? I mean, who is it? It's you know, a lot Bama fans are going to point to Bo Scarborough and Damian Harris. Jalen Hurts is still out rushing those two guys. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're going to point to Nick Chubb and Sonny Michel at Georgia, but Swift has been great out of the backfield too. He's had some explosive runs. They have these change-up guys. LSU the same way. You thought Darius Geis was going to be the best running back in the SEC this year, but he hasn't been able to kind of play at 100% yet. So I'm not ready to crown him either. If the answer is not John Kelly, I'd love to hear from everybody in the comment section who they really do think the best running back in the SEC is.
Daniel Beard does bring up a good point about Kelly, though, that he says he hasn't really done anything yet against an elite defense, and that may be the case. This Florida defense this year is not elite the way that it was, you know, last year when it had all those future NFL guys on there. So from that standpoint, Kelly's still probably got something to prove. But when you mention a guy like Damian Harris, who is probably the highest rated Alabama player on most of the Heisman, you know, odds lists and polls and things like that. And this is no fault to Damian Harris. I don't slight him at all, but I kind of view him and you know, some of these guys who are kind of in a collection of running backs together. I mean, I probably don't give Harris as much credit as I should, just given the fact that he's on a team that's got so many good running backs.
No, yeah, I'm with you, and I think a lot of Alabama fans feel the same way, that he doesn't get probably due credit because there is such a stable. And you know what? He was going to rush for – if Vanderbilt hadn't even been close in that game last week, Damian Harris could have named his yardage total. He could have rushed for 250 easily. But by the middle of the second quarter, Bo's getting carries, Najee's getting carries. Some of these other freshman running backs are getting carries for Alabama. That's just been the nature of the beast for Damian. He gets in, gets 10 or 15 touches, and gets out with 80, 90, 100, 120 yards.
Lee Pace in the comment section also had a really good point, and I hate to bring this up, but it's true. He said, how many Septembers, this is basically the gist of his comment, how many Septembers was it that Leonard Fournette was thought of as the best SEC running back through 4 games, and come November, Fournette was essentially nowhere to be found. So I guess in some respects, being the SEC's best running back through 4 games is not necessarily the spot you want to be in, because for Fournette, by the time he got into the real crucial games that LSU was playing, he was either hurt or just not all that effective, that he wasn't in November what he was in September. That's a fair point.
And I agree with that. And I think when you look at John Kelly, it does. There is a fair piece to point out that he hasn't really played against an incredibly stiff defense just yet. He's going to get it this weekend in Georgia, and we're going to see what he can do. But we really thought we knew what Aris Williams was from Mississippi State heading into that Georgia game. And there again, he gets shut down. When you look at the SEC yardage leaders, I just pulled it up. John Kelly, 81 carries. DeMaria Crockett there in second place from Missouri, 59 carries. So he's head and shoulders above anybody else. And that's kind of why my question is, if it's not John Kelly, who is? And I don't know if I have the answer to it. I really don't. I'm not going to sit here and crown somebody because I feel like they're the best. I want to see it in the numbers, and I want to see it in the teams they played against.
Item number 7 on our AT&T SEC Country Life First and 10 list. And I wanted to bring this quote onto the show because this is something that we've talked about on this show the last 2 days. Florida winning its close games here and what some have called lucky breaks against both Kentucky and Tennessee. Obviously, Gators fans haven't liked that. Gator haters have kind of sort of thrown that in their face. And Jim McElwain, when he appeared on the SEC's weekly teleconference on Wednesday, had something to say about this too. We'll show you the quote on the screen here of his thoughts about those close games. He says, does it really have to come down to that? Does it have to be right at the end? Can we take care of that business up front? How about playing this way in the first and second quarter? Let's come out of the gates firing. With that, I can't tell you how proud I am of our guys in such a short time, but there's a lot we need to improve on. So there's an element of sort of tongue-in-cheek nature, what McElwain says here, but there's also a point in which, even if he's joking, the point he's making, I believe, is true.
Yeah.
I think good teams are proven not by how you perform in close games, but by your ability to avoid close games. And winning games by 2 touchdowns consistently is more proof of a dominant team than being able to escape a lot at the end of games, because you can't be Harry Houdini every week.
Yeah, and I'm going to go with John Rosado, too, because he says, could it be both? And I think it is. It's a little bit of a blessing and a curse. I mean, really, because you're going to get some close games throughout the year. Florida is going to have more close games this year. They're going to be down by 10 in some more fourth quarters this year. And I think when you can look at your teammates in the eye and look on that bench and see your quarterback that's stepping up in situations like that, like Luke Del Rio did last weekend, and understand that you can come back, I think it does give you a confidence. As a football team, you're showing, you know what, we've been here before. We can come back in situations like this. We can do what it takes at the end to win football games like this. And Florida, more times than not for the rest of this year, are going to be in close games. I don't know that they're going to develop enough offense to really run away with some of the games they're going to play down the stretch.
I've tried to be as fair as I can be about that this week, because I do think there's an element of this Florida escaping in the last moment that's not built to last. They won't even, go with you all the way through the 2017 season. However, I do not want to discount the word that you just used, which is confidence. I think that Jim McElwain's a confident head coach. And I think in some form or fashion, I think he's also instilled confidence into his Florida players here. So while I am a little suspicious of, hey, we won close again, look how resilient we are, I'm a little suspicious of that as a storyline. I cannot deny that confidence plays a role in outcomes of games, and Florida just seems to have more than Kentucky and Tennessee, the 2 teams it's beaten the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, one of the teams I saw that it really played a big factor in was 2010 national champion Auburn Tigers, because it seemed like every game they were down by 14, 21 points. And you saw it at the end of the year in the Iron Bowl against Alabama. Alabama's a very good Alabama team, the reigning national champions, up 24-3, and Cam Newton brings that team back. And it seems like every week they knew they had the ability to pull that off. And I'm not saying Florida's going to be that good. I'm not saying they're going to be national championship contenders, but it's all left out in front of them. And if it does come to a big game down the year, down the slate, they're going to have that confidence and that ability that they know they can pull it out.
Josh Conkle in the comment section says the last couple of years we started losing. We can never come back and win that game. At least this year we can come back. And so, maybe that is the positive spin on this. This is a Florida team that's kind of finding a way to get up off the deck right here. I think the next couple of weeks after Vanderbilt, though, for Florida are going to be really interesting. You're talking about LSU coming into the swamp. You're talking about Texas A&M coming into the swamp. Now, I said this week it wouldn't surprise me if South Carolina kind of bounced back and beat Texas A&M, but Texas A&M is also going to beat Florida, too. So these 2 SEC West games in back-to-back weeks for Florida at after the conclusion of the Vanderbilt game this Saturday, it's a pretty interesting test for the Gators to really determine just what this team is and just how much of a threat it is to Georgia in the SEC East.
Yeah, not to mention the emotions that are going to go along with that LSU game. I mean, you're talking about, that's not just a football game for a lot of people involved in that. That is absolute, from LSU's angle, payback from last year, and that's Florida still having a chip on their shoulder from how that all played out.
That's a real rivalry.
It's emotionally taxing, and I know that a lot of coaches and players don't like to point to things like that, but that does happen, where you look at that game on the schedule and you don't look ahead and you don't you don't dwell on that game, but it's emotionally taxing. There's a lot put on the line in weeks like that.
By the way, one more comment on this subject. Andre Smith says Florida simply doesn't have enough offense. And that may be true. It's one thing to be able to win close games, but you got to be able to score enough points to keep getting these W's. And as competition steps up, and LSU and Texas A&M, I believe, are steps up in competition. I think Georgia will be as well. You'll be able to score points to win those games, and that still remains to be seen. The musical chairs at quarterback, it remains to be seen if Florida's just going to be able to score enough points.
Yeah, I think this weekend is going to be a big key for what Florida is moving forward. I think that locking in Luke Del Rio to that starting job, and you hear coaches say this all the time, play like your hair's on fire. Florida's got to play like their hair's on fire early on in these games. I think Luke Del Rio gives them the best chance to come out swinging early on in the first quarters.
All right, really interesting topic here for item number 8 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10. I'm curious what you think about this. I don't know that we've ever actually talked about this topic. So Alphonse Taylor, former Alabama offensive lineman, who's pretty outspoken on social media, had a tweet that got some attention about who he thinks the replacement for Nick Saban at Alabama is going to be. And if you follow the college football news cycle regularly, this is a name you've probably heard before. Let me show you what Alphonse Taylor says in terms of the guy that's going to coach at Alabama next. Dabo Swinney going to come back to Alabama after spending his college years there with the Crimson Tide. So I got to ask you, whatever it is that Saban leaves Alabama, 2 years from now, 6 years from now, 12 years from now, do you want Dabo Swinney to be his replacement?
I don't see why you'd say no right now. You're talking about a guy who's coaching the reigning national champions and actually beat Saban in his own game last year in the national championship game. So I don't think any Alabama fan is going to just hoot and holler if Dabo takes over the job. I don't think anybody's going to be mad. I think that Dabo, what he's going to have is a calculated risk if he's going to leave Clemson. Right now, I think he's a legend at Clemson. I think him and Deshaun Watson and those guys that brought a championship to Clemson last year are absolute legends. But you did hear from Dabo Swinney talking about this today to Kurt Herbstreit. And he says, I'm never going to close the door on something like that. I'm not going to say no right now because in 10 years, I might not like my AD. I might not like the president. Clemson fans might hate me in 10 years. And I think that's a very telling topic that he's not ready to shut the door on that part of his life. He's from Pelham, Alabama. He went to Alabama. He still loves and knows a lot of people from the state of Alabama. And so I think the fact that he's not ready to close that door tells me that that at some point it's been in the back of his mind.
All right, so let me give you a theory on this. You tell me what I think. What you
I love these. I love this.
All right, here is why Alabama shouldn't want Dabo Swinney to be his coach.
Okay.
Dabo, the last couple of years, has been your foil in the national championship game. Alabama won in 2015, lost at the end of the 2016 season. But now, hasn't he kind of become your sworn enemy because of that? Until Alabama gets any kind of measure of revenge against Clemson, hasn't Dabo kind of become Alabama's enemy? Plus, he's building the Clemson program. He's one of the few coaches out there that's actually using a different blueprint than what Nick Saban used. You know, Saban's the hard-driving, win-at-all-cost coach. Dabo Swinney's the nice guy. Dabo Swinney's he's the likable coach. He's the coach you want to hang out with. Saban's the guy you sort of tiptoe past his office because you hope he doesn't call your name and ask you to come in there. You know, Dabo Swinney's just building it a different way. And at this point in time, doesn't Alabama owe Swinney more payback than paycheck?
No, I don't think so. If that had been the only national championship that Alabama had won in the last 20 years, then you'd probably be a little bit more mad about it. I think a lot of Alabama fans last year, and I know this from the circle that I've been in, felt like, you know what, if it wasn't going to be Alabama, we're glad that Dabo was the guy. I think that if Dabo had the personality of Jim Harbaugh or, you know, one of these coaches that you don't like around the country, you know, really had, you know, this attitude that he was better than college football and really carried himself in a different way, then Alabama fans might feel that way. But Dabo is so, like, you know, the likable, nice guy. Like you said, he's one of those guys you feel like you can cheer for. I mean, the thing he's done, the charitable things he said, the way he kind of approaches his team, like you said, he does more with less, you feel like, than Nick Saban does. I think that leads a lot of Alabama fans to really like the way he approaches. I mean, he really does come off to me like he's from the state of Alabama, like he actually is from Alabama, and that's because he is from there.
Justin Grant's got a good comment. He says the ultimate revenge would be to take Clemson's coach, and I understand where you're coming from on that. But listen, Alabama people, do you know what these Auburn people are going to say if you get beat by Clemson again for the national championship? And the Auburn people are going to say, if you eventually do hire Dabo Swinney, well, the only reason why you hired Swinney is because you couldn't beat him on the field. You had to go out and pay for the guy because he was beating you up so much. I mean, they're going to give you a lot of grief for that. Now, maybe that's fair, maybe that's not, but that's what they're going to say. And to that point, what if Swinney wins again? I mean, there's going to be a lot of people around the country that say he's building a better program right now than what Saban currently has at Alabama. At that point in time, isn't it an obligation to kind of even the score back with Dabo again?
Yeah, you know, the Alabama fan in me wants to tell you right now that I don't think that when you go on from Nick Saban to Dabo as your head coach, that they would probably laugh at a lot of Auburn fans saying that. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. You had Gene Chizik as your head coach and won a national championship, and then he's fired 2 years later. So, you know, and listen, that's not in any disrespect to Auburn. I just think that that's kind of the nature of the beast right now with what you're dealing with Nick Saban's built. But I understand what you're saying. I understand the topic and kind of the direction that has come from some of these topics we talked about Dabo, but I really do. I think Alabama, depending on when Nick Saban leaves, I think most Alabama fans would welcome Dabo in with open arms.
Danny McClain says, who cares what Auburn says? He says that in the comment section. Speaking of this, can we say something on the air we said off the air before this show started? Where are all the Auburn fans? In our comment section every day, we got 1 million Georgia people, 1 million Alabama people, we got 1,000 LSU people, Florida people all over the place. Even hear from a lot of Tennessee fans today. I think Auburn's actually pretty good, and whatever problem Auburn had at the beginning of the season, I think they, for the most part, have weathered that storm. We have not heard from a lot of Auburn people since the summer.
Yeah.
Back during the summer, we were hearing from Auburn people all the time. Where are all the Auburn fans?
And I think what's crazy about it too is, obviously I'm a Bama guy, you're a Georgia guy, but we're both high on Auburn.
Yeah.
I think, you think Auburn might still come out and win the West, and I have them as my number 3 team right now in the SEC, starting to pick up a lot of steam. And so it is interesting that we haven't really heard a lot of noise from Auburn fans in the comment section. We get right here, a Riley Miles War Eagle from Dayton, Ohio. That's what I'm ready to hear that from these Auburn fans. Chime up. I mean, this is a big week for Auburn football.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Auburn, while I'll take Mississippi State plus the points, it wouldn't surprise me if Auburn had a big day on Saturday. I think they win the game one way or another. And I think they emerge out of this Saturday as a legit SEC West contender.
No, I'm picking Auburn to have a big day this weekend, and it is because they're at home, and I feel like Auburn fans are starting to feel that vibe a little more. I think that Auburn fans kind of tucked it away a little bit after the Clemson game, especially because of the 11 sacks. I feel like they're starting to emerge back out of their shells and starting to feel a little bit more comfortable about Gus Malzahn and Chip Lindsey.
That is Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. It's AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. Item number 9 here on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. I don't know what you're going to say about this, but I feel like something about this is not quite right. So you probably didn't even follow this storyline too much because it wasn't one of the bigger ones in the SEC last week, but we did have, I want to say on last Wednesday or Thursday show, that Darius Geis was out for the game against Syracuse. But he ended up playing, I guess. What do you have, 8 carries, 13 yards, something along those lines. And it's kind of strange for a player to be announced as out, then play somewhat sparingly, and at least according to the stat line, ineffectively. What went on here from the perspective of LSU coach Ed Orgeron? Well, in the Wednesday SEC coaches teleconference, he was asked about that. We'll show you the quote here on the screen from Ed Orgeron, who said, "We wanted to play him. Obviously, Darius is a competitor. We felt that he was ready to play. I make those decisions when I listen to the trainers and the doctors." So that's Orgeron explaining why Geis got put into the game. Now, I don't know if Geis is healthy or not, but I do know this. At one point in time, he was unhealthy enough, injured enough, to be classified as out for the game, and then they backtracked on that. Are you okay with this coming from LSU?
I don't know if I'm okay with it. And this in and of itself, I'm not ready to say this is a bad look for Ed Orgeron, because that's the initial thought I had in my head. When this news came out that, hey, he's not going to play this weekend, it was like 100% on Tuesday, he's going to be out this weekend. And then we hear Thursday, you know what, it turns out he is going to play. I'm not ready to say that of itself is a bad look for Ed Orgeron. But when you pair it with the quarterback situation and the way he's handled that, and some of the things that have happened with that program over the last couple of weeks, because I'm still questioning the coaching staff for the debacle against Mississippi State. I think a lot of that was on Dave Aranda. I think when you start to pair these things together and you look at the last couple of weeks of coaching staff decisions for Ed Orgeron and company, you do start to wonder how well Ed Orgeron is doing as the head coach. How well does he have his finger kind of on the pulse of this program and on the pulse of his team? Because they haven't looked great. And I think that when you start to ask questions and poke a prod around about why haven't they looked great, Ed Orgeron, for me, the last few weeks, you've had more questions than you've had answers. So I'm not ready to say that just alone, just the Darius Geis looks bad. But all of them coupled in together, I think it starts to give him a bad image.
A lot of comments in the comment section coming in on this. James Crump says Orgeron let the player make the decision, in my opinion. Daniel Beard says he's trying to keep him healthy for the Florida game. Cliff Nelson echoing what James said a moment ago, Orgeron's been putting player safety over wins, especially those with pending NFL careers, and that may have been the reason why he was initially ruled out. Maybe James is right that Geis wanted to play, so he let him play. The problem with that, though, is, and you were a player, you know this, players always want to play.
I was going to say,
no player's ever going to say, I'm too hurt to play. I mean, you only get so many of these in your college career here, so the players are always going to want to play. You've got to have some sort of checks and balances system above the head of the player and, frankly, probably above the head of the coach to make sure you don't make a bad decision on something like that.
There's no doubt about that. That was my original reaction when I saw that comment is, listen, my leg would have been broke. I'd have been dragging around on the field, and somebody would have taken me out of the game. I mean, that's just how players are, especially when you're in some of these programs and you have that mentality. Because we've seen it from Darius Geis. He's as competitive as they come from that running back position. I mean, this is a guy who wants to be on the field, wants to run people over, wants to make people miss. he's going to go to his coach and say, hey, I want to play. I don't think you leave it up to the player at all. I think you talk to the trainers, talk to the doctors, and understand if he's at risk to get injured anymore, then you don't put him in. But I think if he feels good, and obviously they thought he did, then you let the guy go.
Here's why I think this is an issue. It speaks to disorganization more so than some sort of evaluation of injury. Honestly, I don't know if Geis was healthy or not. That to me is almost beside the point. What is a central issue and what could impact LSU in future games this season is after an official announcement was made about your best player that he's out, you then go back on that and change your mind. That's just not the organizational structure that most college football teams follow. That's a pretty unorthodox thing. And for a first-year coach who already sort of appears to be a little haphazard, you almost worry if it's too unorthodox.
No, that's exactly what I'm pointing to. It's just not this one in itself that I'm questioning. It's everything that Ed Orgeron's had going on in the last 2 or 3 weeks. These are non-conference games. These aren't going to have anything going on when you start to get into SEC play a little bit more. So I think if you have the ability to save Darius Geis, you do. And I think that all of this stuff kind of wrapped into one little bundle does leave you asking questions about the structure that you're getting out of LSU's coaching staff.
All right, we'll take a look at all the big games coming in the SEC on Saturday with our AT&T look ahead in just a moment. Before that, though, item number 10 on our AT&T SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So Rick Lamb is a golfer on the PGA Tour, also a big supporter of the Tennessee Vols, and he is an example of someone not happy with Butch Jones. Probably would not agree with Peyton Manning, who we talked about a little earlier in our show. In fact, here's how upset Rick Lamb apparently is with Butch Jones. Take a look at this set of irons he has on the PGA Tour and look at the words that he has put on these. A little bit difficult to read because he's just got them sort of like chiseled in there. But it says, "Fire Butch Jones" on his set of Cleveland irons there. The tweet says, "I can no longer stay silent on this issue." In fact, he was a man of his word because he tweeted something else out as well. He says he's going to be hosting a party here, a goodbye party, tailgate for Butch Jones on the South Carolina weekend on 10/14. Cake and champagne included. Info to follow. Are you okay with PGA Tour golfer kind of going in on Butch Jones here? You okay with that?
The former player in me says no, I'm not okay with it. You're gonna start to ask questions. Not only are you gonna put it on your clubs, but you're gonna throw a goodbye party to a guy that still has his job. The former player in me says no, I'm not okay with that. But I think it's interesting to look farther into this because I've said it on today's show. I cannot get a pulse into really how Tennessee fans feel. I feel like I want to put a poll out there and see which majority really wants Butch Jones fired or wants to keep him, because we hear from both sides every day. Peyton Manning even today coming out and saying, I have Butch Jones' back. I don't understand what the positive is and what the negative is. There are so many people that are so polarized on this issue.
But here's my question, though. Who is Rick Lamb? I watch golf every weekend on TV. I've never heard of Rick Lamb. I mean, maybe this guy needs to worry about his own. I don't necessarily disagree with him about Butch Jones, but maybe he needs to worry about his own career.
Yeah, he might need to. I don't know who he is either, and I follow golf pretty closely. I'm sure that he's a good player, but I'm with you. It's not somebody that pops out at you.
Josh Conkle says it's nice he put Cleveland on his clubs for Tyree Cleveland's catch. You saw the Cleveland logo there. Yeah, I guess the Florida fans have an opportunity to remind him of that. All right, we got a pretty funny champion of life today. It involves Alabama coach Nick Saban. Before we get to that, though, Mike Johnson, Brandon Adams here on AT&T SEC Country Live. AT&T, a proud sponsor of SEC Country Live. AT&T, entertainment your way. And let's do our AT&T look ahead here. Looking ahead to all the big games on Saturday in the Southeastern Conference. Vanderbilt, Florida at noon. That's actually not a bad noon game for me. Kind of leading way to the main event in the 3:30 time slot, Georgia, Tennessee. Butch Jones fighting for his job. Georgia fighting to prove it's for real. Auburn, Mississippi State, actually 6 p.m. for that's a really nice time. It can be over before things get too late. And you know what? 7:30, South Carolina, Texas. Maybe I'm just an SEC junkie. I think that's actually a pretty good game. Leading into Alabama, Ole Miss at night. Maybe that one's a blowout early enough that I can actually go to bed.
Yeah, I think it's a great slate. I think that the games are spaced out enough to where you're going to get all the good ones. I love this Mississippi State at Auburn match. I think that's going to be a fun one to really tell us what we're getting out of these teams. And I think the Ole Miss, I'm telling you, I think they're going to make a little bit more noise than 28.5-point spread they've been giving against Alabama.
Daniel Robbins asked about those times. Those are Eastern times. We use the Eastern time zone here for AT&T SEC Country Live just to kind of keep things a little bit uniform. And speaking of uniformity, we close the show here on AT&T SEC Country Live the same way every day. Much like Tennessee coach Butch Jones on the search for his champions of life, we're looking for champions of life as well. And today, it's Alabama coach Nick Saban who gets that designation because of a recent picture he took with the musician John Oates from Hall & Oates fame here. Now, we'll show you the picture on the screen. There are a couple things about this kind of worth paying attention to. First of all, you brought this up the other day. How short must John Oates be?
I mean, this guy must be 5'2". I'm telling you right now, I've never seen Coach Saban tower over somebody the way he's towering over John Oates, right? I mean, John Oates at max must be 5'2", 5'3".
By the way, how square does Saban look with his golf shirt tucked in,
Yeah.
arms stiff by his side? John Oates also right there in the Saban desk. That's kind of a cool shot. And for those of you who may be curious, this is actually not Nick Saban's first brush with music and famous musical career. You may remember a little piece of video we showed you back during the summer. Another example of Nick Saban with his musical career. Take a look at this. That's not
my
actually
God.
Nick Saban,
That's so
but it looks just like.
so good.
I can never stop watching this. And when I saw that John Oates picture, in my mind, the way my mind works is, it's a perfect excuse to show this guy from whatever band this is that looks.
It's like I keep looking for angles and images that is going to make me think it doesn't look like Nick Saban, but it does. I mean, like every part of this
never
looks like
stops
Nick Saban.
looking like Nick Saban. Hey, y'all have a great weekend. Enjoy the SEC action here on Saturday. We'll be back again on Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Between now and then, though, you can get caught up in the podcast. Go to iTunes, give us a rating and a review there. You can also listen to the show on SoundCloud. Subscribe. It's a big help to us. Share the show with your friends on Facebook. Let them know we're talking about the SEC here each and every day on AT&T SEC Country Live. We'll be back Monday, 3 p.m. Y'all enjoy the games. We'll talk to you then right here on AT&T's SEC Country Live.